Hello everyone, and welcome to another random installment of one of my videos. Today I'm going to be showing you guys my Stamina Sorcerer. Hybridization has really confused me, and I'm just confused, so I'm just going to call it Hybrid Sorcerer of 2023. There you go. And yeah, if you're not a fan of the introduction fun stuff, so I do at the beginning of my videos, there are timestamps in the description if you want to come back to the video or you want to skip ahead. So having said that, let's talk. In hindsight, it's probably not the smartest idea to release this build video so close to the Update 37 patch notes, but we're doing it anyways. So something interesting about this build that is different from my other builds is I have two variations of this spec. Don't worry, it's just switching out a 5-piece set. One is an offensive setup, while the other is a much more survivable setup, and I've been cycling between the two sets so that way I can adapt to the situation, and I've actually found great success with this, so I would recommend carrying both of these sets in your back pocket so that way you can adapt to the situation as well, as Sorcerer is still in a tough spot at the moment. And when it comes to its approachability rating, I'd give this build a 2 out of 5 stars simply for the fact that it's not very forgiving. Even with the survivable setup, it's very difficult to survive on Sorcerer, so it becomes more up to you to make the right decision so that way you do not get dead while playing a build like this. Other than that, it has everything a PvP build could need, but most importantly, it is by far the most fun build that I have played in the last 2 patches, and I'm not joking. This is almost as fun as the Nighthawk was. Maybe it's just because I'm a Sorcerer main, but seriously, it has a kick to it. And I think if you're looking for a PvP sorc build, you're in the right spot. And yeah, one more thing, if this is like your second or more video of mine, or you really just find stuff like this that I've made entertaining or helpful, please consider subscribing, and if you think you're subscribed, please check. YouTube has been doing some really funny stuff lately and unsubbing people and not sending out notifications for things I post, and I would love to hit 2k subs before the Necrom DLC releases. Thank you. And yeah, I made a super dramatic montage for you guys for this build video, and I hope you enjoy it. Taking a look at our character sheet, we have no points into magic, 28 points into health, and 36 points into stamina. These are the stats of the front bar unbuffed. These are the stats of the back bar unbuffed. Do note I have two setups for this build. One is in a very offensive setup. The other one is the defensive setup, which is what we're on right now. I'll show all the stats for both of those right now, I guess. Do note that these numbers do get way higher while you're in combat. For our race on this build, I am a Khajiit. Khajiit is just what I'm playing at the moment. This build is very, very flexible with whatever race that you'd like to be. If you want to be an optimized meta user, you can play Orc, because that would probably be best in slot. But other than that, I don't really have, like, you know, you have to play this race in order for this build to work, because this build is extremely flexible with what you want to play as. Since we are a Khajiit, these are the passives that we get. Robustness, increasing all of our recoveries. Lunar Blessings, increasing all of our max stats. And Feline Ambush, increasing our critical damage and healing by 12% and making us a hide-and-seek pro. On this build, we are a vampire. We are a stage 3 vampire for the passives that we get. More specifically, Undeath, which reduces our damage taken by up to 30% based off of our missing health. This passive is not negotiable on a build like this. Sorc is really, really squishy this patch, and without stage 3 vampirism, you're not going to get too far. But I'm not using stealth anymore since it got heavily gutted, especially for Sorc and crystal weapon and all that. So, yeah, but stage 3, non-negotiable. For our Mundus stone, we are using the Atronarch. This increases our magic recovery. Since we are on a hybrid build, we really need a lot more magic than we normally do, and we're on a sorc, so our stamina sustain kind of takes care of itself. Also, we have dark deals, so we can convert all the magic that we do get into stamina, so that part is taken care of. What really suffers is our magic recovery, so that's why we have the Atronarch on there to really help out with our mag recovery. For our consumables, we are using Jewels of Misrule. This gives us recovery for both our magic and stamina, and also boosts our max health, which is great for a hybrid build like this. If you can afford it, you can use Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch. This does practically the same thing, but gives you more health and more recovery. For our potion, we are using the Essence of Health Potion. This restores our resources and gives us resource recovery as well, and it just covers all the bases when it comes to a good all-around potion. You can make this with Bug Loss, Columbine, and Mountain Flower. And no, we are not using any poisons on this build. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, when we were looking at our character sheet, there are two specs to this build. One is an offensive spec, the other is a defensive spec. I'll go over both here really quickly. So the set that doesn't change on our front bar is Mace of the Fire. This has a shock glyph on it, and it is charged. If you don't know what the Way of Fire set does, basically it's a really good proc for keeping up consistent pressure on an opponent. On our offhand, we have another Mace of the Fire. This one has a poison enchantment. It is also charged. We have the enchantments on here over the poisons, the double dot poisons, because I find that these enchantments are way more bursty than a poison could be. And, yep, it's nice. On our back bar, we have the Vegetarian's Ice Staff with a weapon damage enchantment. It is defending. If you don't know what this does, basically, whenever you cast Weakness to Element, which is our debuff on the back bar, you create a tether between you and your enemy, and that tether deals damage to everyone in between it and the target that it's, applied to. And it ticks up in damage the longer it's applied to the target. We're going to be able to keep this up pretty consistently. This is a very nice thing to have on the back because it allows us to have a lot more pressure than we would normally have. And if you don't have the Vegetarian's Ice Staff, or whatever you want to call it, you can always use an Ice Staff of Endurance, so that way you can bump up your health a little bit more on the back bar. On our head, we have Balorg's Mask, meaning it's medium, with a tri-stat enchantment. It is well fitted. This is here for the one line of weapon and spell damage that it gives to us. On our chest, we have a Cuirass of the Fire with a tri-stat enchantment. It is reinforced. Reinforced, heavy chest, no-brainer. I'm gonna go ahead and skip to the jewelry so that way I can show you the sets that we change out since they're on the body. For our necklace, we are using Necklace of the Fire with a weapon damage enchantment. It is infused. For our first ring, we are using Ring of the Fire with a weapon damage enchantment. It is infused. And for our second ring, we are using the Ring of the Wild Hunt with a weapon damage enchantment, and it is swift. If you're not using the Ring of the Wild Hunt, you're doing something wrong, because speed is how you stay alive on a build like this, and the fact that you can move so fast with this on really just helps you with damage and survivability, because the damaging part comes from you not being able to lose sight of your opponent, basically. So you're constantly going to be on top of them and able to move around, and the second things get kind of hot, you can just book it and get out of there. No one is faster than you on this build, and it's very nice to move this fast. And if you don't want to use Wild Hunt for some strange reason, you can use Mark and Ring of Majesty. Okay, there you go. Okay, so for the interchangeable sets, for the offensive setup that I like to use when, you know, I need a little bit more damage to kill people, and I'm not so concerned about my survivability, I use Deadlands Assassin. So on our shoulder, we have Deadlands Assassin Arm Cops with a Stamina enchantment. Preferably, all of these would be Tri-Stat enchanted, but, you know, PCNA. This is well fitted. And if you don't know what Deadlands Assassin does, it gives you a bunch of lines of damage and also a proc at the very end, which, when you do a medium weave or a fully charged heavy, throws some knives and stuff. For our belt, we have Deadlands Assassin's belt with a Stamina enchantment. It is Divines. For our hands, we have Deadlands Assassin Bracers with a Stamina enchantment. It is well fitted. For our legs, we have Deadlands Assassin's Guards with a Stamina enchantment. These are Divines. For our boots, we have Deadlands Assassin Boots with a Stamina enchantment. These are Divines. And for the set that we swap out from time to time if we find that we're taking too much pressure in a match, obviously, we have Mara's Bomb in our back pocket. If you don't know what Mara's Bomb does, basically, it's like a meta defensive set right now. Every time when a negative effect is removed from you, restore, you know, some health, and it can occur every 1 second. Here's the thing, whenever someone reapplies a negative effect to you, that counts as removing the negative effect from you. So if like someone is spamming, you know, Venomous Claw on you, every time they use Venom Claw on you, it's just going to reapply this. So basically, you're getting 1,600 health every second practically with this set on, and if there's a lot of effects on you, it just purges all of them for you and gives you a nice big fat burst heal as well. And this, combined with your movement speed, just means you can just cheese. You can just kind of cheese your survivability, so it's very nice to have. For our shoulders, we have Mara's Bomb Pauldrons with a health enchantment. Again, all of these should be Tri-Stat if you can afford it. I wouldn't do Reinforced on this one. I'd probably go well fitted for all of these, and then maybe like 2 Divines. So 2 Divines and then the rest well fitted, because, you know, you're increasing the cost of roll dodge by having heavy on. For our belt, we have Mara's Bomb Girdle with a Stamina enchantment. It is sturdy. For our hands, we have Mara's Bomb Gauntlets with a Stamina enchantment. It is sturdy. For our legs, we have Mara's Bomb Greaves with a health enchantment. It is sturdy. And for our feet, we have Mara's Bomb Sabatons with a health enchantment, and it is reinforced. On our front bar, we have Whirling Blades. This is our execute, and we use this to kill people when they get low on health, and, you know, it's pretty good as a spammable too if you just so happen to walk into a group of low health enemies because someone just used an ultimate. Our next ability we have is Resolving Vigor. This gives us a nice heal over time and also gives us minor resolve, so we have a little bit more armor. My friend Ninja's like, why do you have this on the front bar? I have this on the front bar, one, because sometimes you can't switch bars because this game is broken, and second, we can just use this and then continue to go offensive without needing to switch bars. Next, we have Crystal Fragments. So this is a very interesting choice, but I like using this. So if you've played Nightblade before, you know what Spectral Bow is. Basically, this performs the same thing, but, you know, it just kind of happens whenever you cast an ability. So this is here because this is a nice little burst ability that you can have just kind of proc out of nowhere, and then you can follow it up and just blast someone in the face with some really hard-hitting frags. And at the same time, if you're trying to hit someone from far away, you can just spam this on them and just deal a little bit of chip damage. Or, you know, if someone's running away from you and for some reason you can't catch them, you just mash this a few times and they'll die. Next, we have Bloodthirst. This is our spammable. I really like this spammable and how it works. Since both of our weapons are charged, using this allows us to proc Hemorrhaging and also Mangle, so this really does hurt our opponent. And we do heal for a little bit of the damage that we cause, so the more damage we're able to deal with this, because we have Breach Up and all that other stuff, the more we're going to heal for. This does help us stay a little bit more offensive, but the healing is not super noticeable, so I wouldn't rely on it to stay alive. That's why we have Vigor on the front, so that way our heal over time can take care of us there where this won't. But this is a really good spammable nonetheless. It procs our enchantments and it hits multiple times, so it's guaranteed to crit, which also buffs one of the abilities we have on our back bar, which is Crit Surge. Our next ability we have is Streak. This is like a no-brainer on Sorc. We have this here so that way we can get in and out of situations. Also, this doubles as a stun, so that way if we need to stun somebody on demand, we can. We streak through them, we stun them. Most of the time when you streak through them, you're gonna have your frags ready, so you'll just blast them with that. If not, you're just gonna continue to flood them with Flurry, and you know it's very good skill to have. Good for movement, good for survivability, good for offense and defense. Our front bar ultimate, we have Dawnbreaker of Smiting, because we're a melee spec with this. And, you know, it hits really hard, it stuns everyone in a cone, and it allows you to follow up with Spin to win and just, you know, delete people from existence. It's very nice. And having Dawnbreaker slotted gives us 3% more damage, and also it hits 10% harder on vampires and werewolves. On our back bar, we have Race Against Time. This is here as our source of CC immunity and just removal from snares and stuff. This does give us Major Expedition and Minor Force, which is a very good combination. And I do like this ability quite a lot on this build. This really lets us keep our speed up, and also we can't be rooted with this ability, so very good to have this ability. I know some people aren't going to have it because, you know, Race Against Time DLC, or you're just lazy and you don't want to farm it. If that's going to be the case, you can run Evasion. Either morph will really work, so just pick whichever one you feel like you need more of. Next up, we have Dark Deal. This is our sustain and burst heal ability. Basically, we convert our magic into health and stamina, and a little bit of extra stamina over 10 seconds. The fact that this has a 1 second cast time is kind of stupid, and it doesn't even give us that much health. But, you know, this is what we got to work with, and, you know, it's pretty good, especially for our sustain, but this is why we're leaning more into magic recovery than stam recovery. Next, we have Crit Surge. This is our damage buff, and while it's active, every single time we deal critical damage, we heal for a little bit of health, and this can occur every 1 second. With all the dots that we have going on this build, we're going to be getting heals all the time constantly with this ability, so it really helps us stay offensive. Next, we have Elemental Susceptibility. This ability costs nothing and afflicts them with Major Breach, and this morph afflicts the enemy with every single status effect every 6 seconds. And we have an Ice Staff so we can proc Shield, which allows us to deal 10% more critical damage, which is very nice. Also, this gives us access to our Vatestrand proc, so it's a lot of pressure in just one ability, which costs nothing, so it helps with our max sustain. Next, we have Hurricane. This is our armor buff. I love this skill a lot. This is a very fun armor buff to have. Basically, you cast this, you get your resolve, and you run faster, 15% faster because of the Minor Expedition. But also, the longer this armor buff is active, the bigger the radius around you goes that deals damage. And look, you're literally the eye of the storm. This is a hurricane. What do you think is going to happen when people get close to you? They're going to get hurt. For our back bar ultimate, currently I'm using Absorption Field, which is the negate magic morph. I find a lot of the times when I'm outnumbered, this comes in really handy for shutting people's healing off, and at the same time allowing me to get some healing while I'm standing inside of it. Placing this in a corridor or something is just really handy to have on the back bar. But I was running the Atronarch on the back bar, so that way we could get access to the Daedric Protection passive, since we don't really have access to it anywhere else. But, you know, I found that negate is just a little bit more useful than having the Atronarch on the back bar. No brainer. Make sure you fill out your passives. Oh, and real quick, when you're filling out your passives, I would not recommend putting any points into Trifocus, because I like blocking and it consuming my stamina. So yeah, we have a 9 staff on the back bar, so I wouldn't put anything into Trifocus. Even though it gives you a heavy attack shield that absorbs damage, blah 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 blah, I really want to watch our magic recovery, and just putting this on kind of ruins our mag recovery, because I block a lot on the back bar. For our champion points, in the role player tree, we have Meticulous Disassembly, Master Gatherer, Plentiful Harvest, and Steed's Blessing. In the sweaty tree, we have Duelist Rebuff, Deadly Aim, Master at Arms, and Untamed Aggression. In the potato tree, we have Celerity, Survival Instincts, Pain's Refuge, and Sustained by Suffering. When you're putting points into Mystic Tenacity, only put 10 points in there, so that way you can suffer a little bit longer, which also allows Maras to proc, you know, and, you know, you just get more benefit from suffering because, you know, CP. Aim for these passives, but don't forget to fill out your little golden stars as well. Welcome to the combat stuff section of this video. If you have no idea what a combat stuff section is, basically what we do is we go over some gameplay, I show you the rotation of the build, I talk about stuff that you can use with the build, so like tips and tricks on how to play it, and I just better help you understand what we're doing with a build like this, so that way you don't just go into this build putting the gear sets on and be like, okay, how in the world do I play something like this? Because you can have the build and the gear sets, but if you don't have the training or the knowledge on how to use the build, you're not going to be effective with it at all. So that's what we do here. So to start out, I want to go over the rotations on this build. So let's start with the buffing rotation. You're going to begin on your back bar, and you're going to first use Hurricane, then you're going to use Crit Surge, and then you're going to use Race Against Time. And depending on the situation you're in, whether you're about to engage in a fight or you're still pre-buffing, you can either use Dark Deal to go ahead and start getting some stamina, or you could open with your elemental susceptibility on the back bar, which will lead into our offensive combo. And our offensive combo is really simple. So once you got your elemental susceptibility ticking on the target and you're close enough with the vape proc on them, you're going to go to your front bar. Ideally, first you'd press Vigor to go ahead and get a heal going and the minor resolve, and then you're going to lean into your flurry and just spam flurry over and over and over again till your crystal frag procs, and by that point you want to cast your crystal fragments to do a little bit of extra damage, and when they finally get low enough, you want to start using your spin to win to try and execute them, but you want to make sure that your tether from your Vate Ice Staff is up all the time along with all of your other buffs, so your Hurricane, your Race Against Time, and then your Vigor on the front, so the minor resolve and the heal, so that means cast it like every 4 seconds. And yeah, when it comes to using your ultimate abilities, I tend to be more conservative with the use of my abilities and saving them for when I really need them. So like in a tense 1v1 situation, or when there's a group and there's just a massive opening begging to be Dawnbreakered. But both situations call for different moves, as in like things that you got to do differently. So most of the time, if I'm in a 1v1 and I'm going to use a Dawnbreaker on somebody, I keep flurrying until my crystal frag is ready, and then I use my Dawnbreaker, and as soon as they're stunned by the Dawnbreaker, you cast your crystal frag, so it's kind of like bow proc on Nightblade, and it feels really good. That's a lot of burst damage, and then you just continue to flurry them and then do the spin to win, and they should be dead. When it comes to groups, you want to open on your back bar with your tether, and then you want to streak through the group, and then you want to turn around and then use your Dawnbreaker, and then just start spinning, and then maybe like 2 or 3 of them will die or something, unless they break free and they have a Twilight and they just start healing or whatever. But you want to have your tether up, because that's just additional damage to every enemy that's caught in between you and the target that you've tethered yourself to, and that's just more pressure that everyone has to deal with. That's the enemy. And yeah, that's how you use Dawnbreaker. When it comes to using your negate on the back bar, you want to use it in corridors when you really need to play defensive. So you want to use it in an area that you can lock down with your ultimate. So like in a small hallway or whatever, you want to cast it in there, and then normally you're going to just need to press your Vigor on the front bar, and then you can start going offensive because we have the healing morph of it. So that way you can add some pressure to the enemy, so that way they're not hurting you anymore. And yeah, that's pretty much just how you use negate. You don't use it that often, but there will be situations where you will need to use it, so that's normally how you want to use it in those situations. When it comes to staying alive on this build, that's where things start to get a little bit different. Our main survivability tool that we use is our movement speed, simply because if the enemy can't hit us, we're not going to take damage. Therefore, it becomes the best way to mitigate damage on a sorc. Since we move really fast with Wild Hunt, Major, and Minor Expedition, we're easily able to choose which situations we want to stay in engagement with, or which ones we just want to break out of and get out of by just streaking away and then going to our back bar and then start healing. Generally, what you want to do to survive is you want to break line of sight, and you want to get behind some cover, an object, a wall, anything, and then you want to start using your heals. And if they're still pressuring you, try to break the distance even further by casting Streak like 2 or 3 times, and then you can start healing. But make sure there's always something that you can use for cover nearby, and just know the environment that you're in, so that way when you do start taking pressure, you can get behind some cover, and then you can just start healing yourself. In most cases, I tend to do a lot of roll dodging on this build as well, since we don't have a lot of upfront percent mitigations because we're on a Sorcerer. Rolling is probably our best way to stay alive when there's no cover nearby, so normally I just end up spamming roll dodge 3 times or something like that in order to get close enough to cover, then I can start healing myself and, you know, start playing a little bit more defensive with the line of sight that we have. So don't be afraid to roll dodge a few times before you can get yourself in a good position to stay alive. When it comes to our healing, however, so like our healing rotation, we benefit the most when we're going really offensive, simply because we have crit surge and we have flurry, and those two, when they're ticking along with our dots, so even our vape proc on the back, just gives us a massive amount of healing so we can kind of stay offensive for a little bit. And since we have so many little instances of damage with all of our dots, our crit surge is going to be proccing quite often, so it does really help keep us alive. And also, having vigor on the front is good for those situations where you're like, if I had just a little bit of extra healing, I think I might be able to kill this guy. So you can just press vigor while you're on the front and then just continue to flood your opponent with flurry, and you'll find a lot of the time that is a good way to keep yourself alive. But sometimes the healing from keeping the offense going is not going to be enough to keep you alive because you're fighting a couple people at once. So at that point, what you want to do is you want to break line of sight. So get behind a wall, put something between you and your enemy, and you're going to be on your back bar, and most of your healing is going to end up coming from Dark Deal at that point. And while you're casting your Dark Deal, make sure you use some of that stamina to roll dodge on the occasion, and also use vigor. And don't be afraid to block from time to time. There are going to be some heavy hitting attacks, especially direct damage ones from like Nightblade, so like Spec Bow, Surprise Attack, and Incap, that you're going to want to block while you're on your back bar trying to stay alive. And you combine all that with your ability to move faster than them, and that's basically how you stay alive. We don't have too much when it comes to our healing rotation and healing power. If we really need it, we put Maras on, and that kind of takes care of us as well. But if you really need to heal yourself in a tense situation, just break line of sight, go to your back bar, and Dark Deal yourself to full health with some vigors tossed in between, so that way you can get up there a little bit faster. And don't be afraid to use a negate if you really need the healing. But try and keep on the offensive for as long as you can, and if you get under, like, maybe, I'll say 40% health, that's when you need to start thinking about playing a little bit more defensive. So let's really quickly go over some tips and tricks, rules of thumb, I guess you could say, for things you should and should not do, or things you should just keep in mind while you're playing this build. The first thing you need to keep in mind is players that have access to a Purge. So someone who has Mara's Bomb on, or they're playing a Templar or a Warden, those players especially are going to be really difficult to take down, because if they are able to remove all of your negative effects, one, you're losing healing, and second, you're losing damage. And since we rely on those so much, you know, that's obviously not very good for our build. So you're gonna have to resort to using more direct damage attacks. So Dawnbreaker, your frag when it's ready, and just keep flooding them with flurry. Don't be afraid to have to break line of sight from them for a little bit so you can get some resources back, because they're definitely going to drain you of your resources if you have to keep fighting them for a while. And another thing in just general, don't make stupid decisions. Be aware of the decisions that you're making. Don't go into a group of like 5 or 6 people and expect to kill them all with a Dawnbreaker spin to win. You might get lucky. I mean, you could try it, but most of the time I think you should wait and know the kind of opponents that are in that group before you engage. If you are going to try and fight outnumbered, make sure there's something nearby that you can use as line of sight in order to stay alive, because 9 times out of 10, if you bite off more than you could chew, you're just going to get destroyed, even with the defensive setup on this build. And the last thing I want to mention, and I want to reinforce this point, is keep your healing up. I make the mistakes of leaving my buffs down too long to the point where I'm exposed and I get killed. Try to keep your eye on your buffs and make sure your healing is constantly ticking, so that means vigor is active as often as you can get it to be. And also go to your back bar and get a Dark Deal from time to time, even if, you know, you don't quite feel like you need it. Just get in the habit of doing it really quickly, so that way you can get the health when you need it, and the resources as well. And yeah, that's about all I have to say when it comes to not being an idiot while playing this build. This build is a blast to play. It's a lot of fun to play, but, you know, it's by no means the most competitive build in the world. I mean, there are other specs for that, but if you just want to have fun and play Sorcerer again and enjoy it, this build will definitely do that for you. But yeah, I think that will about wrap it up for my hybrid Sorcerer build of 2023. This thing's probably going to get nerfed in like 2 days when the patch notes come out. And if it does, anything changes about the build, I'm going to be really upset, because I just spent all this time making this build video. But, you know, that's just what happens with ESO. If you have any questions about the build, if it does end up changing, leave it in the comments. Any questions you have about the build, I will be sure to answer them in full to the best of my ability, so that way the build can kind of stay up to date. So don't be afraid to put a comment in the comments if the DLC or the update does change it. Still wonder why I'm playing this game sometimes. It's because of you guys in the community we've built. Speaking of which, if you are still watching the video by this point, that means you enjoyed it. So please please consider subscribing. I want to hit 2,000 subscribers before the Necrom DLC comes out, and that would go a long way and mean a lot to me if you would click the subscribe button. And if you think you're subscribed, please check. YouTube has been doing some really silly stuff lately, and I'm not very happy about it. Have a good night, guys.